people always say, like, you know, with the comic book industry in particular, that you know, like everyone says, we got to get kids into comics, we got to get kids reading comics, or this industry is gonna die. And I was curious about, like, you know, like what your thoughts were on something like that statement. Like, you know, did you guys have an opinion on something like that?
I feel like it's just they're not making comics for kids that are appealing, because they'll either make comics that are like totally gory and stuff, and like that's cool, but like not a lot of kids are going to be allowed to read that, or they'll make like the most watered down thing, which isn't always very entertaining for kids. So
it's funny
they're kind of missing like that middle spot.
Right. I agree with you, and I've said that many times. Like, how about you, Artie? Jack, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, Artie pretty much said it all. I mean, there isn't a lot of good, like, wholesome kid stuff, because it's like, I mean, I don't know. I just think like all ages action adventure titles, like stuff like Marvel and DC were doing like 30 years ago, is where it's at, because it's like that stuff's like I don't know, anyone can read that, anyone can enjoy it. It's not just for kids, it's not just for adults,
right?
But it's like in these last 10 years they've sort of lost that middle ground. I mean, kids are still into superheroes, but it's just through like the movies and video games and other media. It's not through the source material. So that's
go ahead,
my
John.
take.
I was going to say, a great way I like to point an example of like modern audiences, the way stories are told for modern audiences versus the way they were back in the day, is if you look at one TV series that was remade, and that's Battlestar Galactica. If you look at the original 70s Battlestar Galactica, that was a very fun show that was full of adventure, and it was accessible to everybody. Then you look at the modernized remake they did in the mid-2000s, and while that was also a very good show, it was also highly political, super serious, very violent, and not necessarily accessible to all audiences. And it just kind of reminds me of that specifically with comics, is that it became I don't want to say less fun, but less, like you said, multi-applicable to everybody, where they can pick it up, and more like gritty and, you know, adult themed, and, you know, a little bit more edgier than something that's a little bit more lighter and fair, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I like diversity in tones a lot. Like, I mean, it's good there isn't like really heavy censorship anymore, and like creators are able to do what they want and like tell intense stories or whatever. Like, and there's stuff you wouldn't have been able to get away with in like the best era of comics that like they can do now, and it's really good. But I feel like they've kind of done everything except for what made comics and what made them as popular as they were when they were at their peak. So that's just, yeah, I think that's, yeah, good, really good point.
How about you, Ryan? Do you have a perspective on this as well?
I have a lot of perspective on it. I'm trying to make when we get to my comic, it's my target is middle grade, 12, 13. That's sort of my sweet spot, you know.
Yeah, it feels like it's all ages. I have read your book, and I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to get into that and talk about it a little bit too.
Yeah, and what part of what multiple things inspired me to do it. One was these guys getting into comics again. I got out of comics. I always joke in high school, I joined a band and wanted a girlfriend, so I got out of comics. You know?
Right?
Well, I mean, you can line up your last issue of Spider-Man with like when the first Nirvana album came out. It like lines up perfectly. Like, we did the math. I remember we were like,
as soon as I smelled that Teen Spirit, I wasn't smelling newsprint anymore.
I like it.
And then, I mean, I always say Madman and Hellboy sort of kept sort of one toe into comics a little bit through college.
Star Wars Dark Empire. I remember
Star Wars, yeah, that's still.
Oh, that was good stuff.
It was really a trickle. And then, so these guys got into comics. and drawing too. We would sit around the kitchen table drawing, and they would get bored and go away. But my wife is a children's librarian, and she'd bring home these graphic novels. She'd bring home Amulet and Bone and all this stuff, and that was part of the inspiration as well. So I would say, I mean, yeah, the floppy comics, it's tough to get those into kids' hands because they're not going to come across them at spinner racks and magazine racks and that sort of thing. But they're reading them at books. They're getting them at book sales. They're getting them at the library. They're getting them at Barnes and Noble. They're reading manga.
Yeah, that seems to be the thing that's taken over big time. Like I had, people were saying that a lot, that manga is taken over it, but I saw it like when I went to Barnes and Noble recently. I was like, oh my God, like it is like 15 racks of like manga, and then like only 2 of like Marvel, DC, and Image, and all the, and I was like, oh my God, it's like so true. Like they've taken over,
I went to a Newbury Comics at Solomon Pond Mall, and it was like 4 bookshelves of manga, and then like 1 small bookshelf of comics in the far corner. But the manga was like right up front, and I was like, "Oh man, the place is called Newbury Comics, and it's fallen so far,
Yeah,
They should change it to Newberry Manga.
I used to call it Newberry Everything But Comics, but but like, no, it's interesting. Like, so Jack and Artie, like in school, do like, are kids in the comics? Like any of your classmates, or are they more just the movies and shows now? Like, I'm trying to like, what's up?
Oh, never mind. I cut ahead. Keep going.
No, I was just saying, like, I'm trying to see, get, like, your unique perspective, since, like, you're that age, and that, like, everybody's also trying to get kids to read comics, but do you see that happening a lot, or is it, like, kids are into other things, and...
We are a very rare breed, me and Artie.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured, like...
Yeah,
do you mean about the comics or other things, or both?
That will remain anonymous. But anyways, just like, I have friends who will like catch like an issue of something every once in a while. They just don't have parents who are into the stuff who can drive them to the comic book store in time for like to get new issues and stuff. And like they might get their hands on something when it's like collected in trade paperback because they like the movies and they know those characters and stuff. But yeah, there's I have a lot of manga buddies.
Okay.
And yeah, a lot of the movies, like the MCU stuff, just really took off. Artie, I know you have friends who are into the same stuff.
I mean, yeah, like pretty much everyone has seen the Marvel movies and likes the Marvel movies, and like Star Wars and sometimes DC and stuff like that. I'm gonna say probably like one friend who's actually read like comics before, but like mostly other people, like I would say maybe like 60% of the kids are into manga, maybe like 50 or 40, but somewhere around there.
I don't know about you guys, but there wasn't that many kids reading comics when I was a kid either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's reading X-Men and wearing X-Men shirts and stuff like.
Yeah, like I'm old enough that I was reading at the time when it wasn't cool at all, and like you had to hide the fact that you're into comics. So I was like, I was from that era. So, but I had a group of friends that were into comics. But it's funny that you say that because I didn't, and most of my friends weren't into comics until high school. So like I kind of missed it out on it, like when I was younger. Like I never was into it, and I kind of found it later, in life.
That's true. I had like we had a really good art department in my high school, and all the guys were taking art classes. We were all there because we wanted to draw comics. So I would say that is a difference. I mean, there was a core between a couple grades. There was about 6 of us that were all wanted to be comic book artists, and so there was a couple guys that were, into. I mean, it was like Akira was the proto manga, and Gundam, that not Gundam style, but the mecha thing, you know.
Crocs.
Yeah.
But everybody started with Marvel and DC, so I think it definitely has changed. But it's not like it was never the 40s and 50s were the real heyday, the real peak of it was a long time ago. But there's, you know, I would still make the case that it's more popular than ever. Even picture books are starting to give up real estate to comic style storytelling. There's a reader format. My wife brought a big pile of those home yesterday to show me. Is that some of the kids, when they're ready to start reading on their own, are starting to pick up comic style books. So the appetite's there. We're visual culture, more visual culture every year with our phones and our emojis and everything.
Yeah, that's
else.
true. Yeah,
our text messages read like a comic book page with the little dialogue balloons going back and forth.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I never even looked at it that way, but that's true.
So
I think it's a lot like what, you know, like Jack and Artie were saying, where there's like access issues, like if you can't get to the library, or if you have parents that won't drive you to the comic store. I kind of wish, like, you know, like I know they tried to do Walmart, like to try to get comics there. Yeah. I think that's kind of the problem too, is like that you can't get them anywhere but comic stores, and there's less and less of those each year, you know. And I think that's part of the problem, along with, like, you know, like if you hand a kid, you know, will they read digital or would they rather play a video game? I look at it that way too, you know. It's you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's a discussion, you know, that I you know, publishers are constantly trying to crack that code, and I think it's just a lot of different factors, you know. Go ahead, Johnny.
I think primarily though is like comics are to be discovered by you. You know what I mean? Like it's like when you get into comics, like, oh, I discovered comics, and then I couldn't stop putting them, you know, couldn't stop reading them, couldn't put them down. So it's like they can be promoted to, you know, all ends by companies to read comics, but it's really up to the individual to discover comics and then discover the different variations of comics. Like your entry point could be, you know, superhero books, but then as you go along, you're like, oh, wait, here's some indie books. Here's, you know, like the Max line or Vertigo. You know, somebody might see Sandman on Netflix and go, this is really cool, and pick up the graphic novels, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You know, my wife has a good point too, like about like why Dogman is so popular, because it's like the stuff that they offer in the Scholastic fairs, you know, and things like that. You know, if they put the Ultimates in there, you know, or like Watchmen or something, I think we'd see something, you know, a little different. You know, I don't know. You know,
I love Watchmen, but I love Watchmen, but I don't know about giving it to.
Well, yeah, that's true. Like, let's say more like
the kids aren't ready for Rorschach, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Let's say something like, I don't know, like maybe like 80s Spider-Man or something like that, like
or Mighty Mascots.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, Mighty Mascots would be great. I'd be down with that, you know. But yeah, no, stuff like that tone of superhero, I think would be perfect, you know.
I mean, even I think some of the, you know, well, look at all the Marvel trades over the last year. They're getting smaller, like the classic stuff, like the original Silver Age stuff, is starting to come out in a smaller format, and I don't think that's not geared towards you know, guys our age. That's geared towards younger readers, I think.
Yeah, like a pocket book, kind of like they call them, like the pocket books, where they're like like a 6x9 kind of size.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, they're that manga size. The covers. I always forget his name. Is it Andy Cho who's doing the covers for those?
I think so. He
has a retro style, but at the same time, it's kind of hip and stuff too. So I think, you know, there's reasons to be optimistic for fans of the classic Western superhero genre. That there's still a foot in the door, and you just need to look at the box office receipts to know that you know, tights and capes and cowls are still.
Yeah, still a thing. Yeah, exactly. I don't think, even if, like, you know, DC and Marvel like start publishing less and less and less, I still think that there always will be people making comics and people digesting it, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it may change what kind of format we read it in and things like that. But I think you're right. Like I think like when you look at your phone, that is a visual thing, and it's there's something to that. The whole digital thing, and it's just gonna morph. I think.
Yeah.